Hello! On the Mum Show today, I am very excited. We are talking about grandparents, and here to help us go through this topic, I'm going to introduce you to my mum. So get yourself comfortable and let's get started. To the Mum Show. I'm joined here in the Mum Show kitchen once again with Pastor Claire Hooper, child therapist Emma Brown, and as a very special guest, I've brought my mum.
Yay! We're so excited.
But we will also give her a proper name, and that's Julie Smith, wife, mother, grandmother, educator, and the maker of me. I kind of appreciate.
Impressive title.
And we're going to be talking about grandparents and how we can enjoy grandparents in the lives of our children. So welcome.
Thank you.
Pleased
Good
to see you
here. Yes.
Good. I'm pleased to see you here. So I'm really keen to know, first of all, I've known you as mum.
Yes.
I've known you as nanny. What would you say is the biggest difference between being a mum and being a grandma?
With being a mum, you have all the responsibility and you feel the responsibility of bringing up your children. Being a grandparent, you enjoy your grandchildren because the responsibility is not exactly yours. It's your daughters or your sons. And so without that responsibility, the enjoyment is just more.
But
It's fascinating that.
Do you know, I noticed though, when we were going through labour, just to be really graphic, that was hard for you, wasn't it?
It was.
But you've not crossed over to the grandparent yet, I guess, in
No.
that moment. You're still the parent, and that's the biggest role that you have, seeing your child.
It's really emotional. It's very raw because, one, you remember your own childbirth experiences. But when you see it happening to one of your offspring, you actually just want to take it for them. Say, I know what's going to happen. I know how you're feeling right now, and I wish I could take it.
Absolutely. And you've got 4 daughters as well, haven't you? So you've been through this
9 grandkids.
times. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Did it feel different? Did it feel different each time you had a new grandchild?
According to your favourite?
I have no favourites. They are all wonderful grandchildren, every single one of them.
No, I mean a favourite daughter.
I don't have favourite daughters either.
But did it feel different? Like, did that pain, because the first grandchild, you're saying it felt very like, you know, watching them go through it. Did you feel like that every time one of your girls had a child?
Absolutely. I'm on the end of the phone waiting to hear if somebody's, you know, sort of the final news. Yes, the baby's been born. And then with one of them that was taking a long time, we were travelling down to Dover. And I just kept getting on the phone. I'm saying, something's wrong, something's not going right.
Yeah.
Of course, everything was okay, but you
felt it.
Yeah, every
That
time.
was the first grandchild, actually, wasn't it?
No, I was there for the first grandchild. Oh, wow. We happened to be there at a wedding, and she went into labour 2 weeks early.
Wow.
And so we were actually at the hospital.
That's amazing.
And that was, we stayed there all night. And then her dad, John, had to dash off on a plane to, I think it was Denmark or something like that. And so he stayed to see the birth, and then off he went on the plane.
That's so crazy. Because I often think it's a really interesting dynamic because I've just noticed, for instance, like with my relationship, sometimes if one of the children are being difficult to one of us, there's kind of, I think sometimes I can see a little glint of feeling compassion and empathy because we're still your kids, but then they're also your grandkids. So you're totally on their side and totally loving them and feeling where they're feeling. But you'll often sort of go, oh, you look really tired, love, or is everything okay? So you're like, I get how it's easier, but I think it must also feel like a double whammy sometimes.
No, not really, no.
Okay.
It is still there, that, you know, I think when you notice your son, daughter, in my case daughters obviously, they're really tired, you know, and then I hear, you know, so, oh, how busy they are with school, with church, with jobs, and I just think, well, especially those that live away, come up and just rest and just let me do it. Because you don't stop being a parent. You don't ever stop being a mum.
So that's your motivation then? Because obviously that happens to all of us at times when the grandparents get involved. It's because you want to give your child that rest.
That's right. So you want to do that, but then also on top of that, you're actually really enjoying the time that you're having with the grandchildren. You know, because that is so different. And it's strange how it's different. It's lovely being a grandparent, but you can't always put your finger on it. And it's not because, oh, you can give them back at the end of the day. It's not that at all.
Are you the sort of grandparent you thought you'd be?
Yes, I think so.
What do you think you'll be like as a grandparent?
I'm really excited already. Honestly,
I'm glad you said that.
I am so excited already. I was
ready.
A bit like you, Julie. I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to have my mum present for the birth of my first daughter, and my parents lived in a different country at the time, so it felt really, really precious. And she wasn't there, like standing over me. I remember she was in the room, but she kind of was really respectful and kind of stepped back and allowed my husband to kind of be, you know, the one that was really present. But it was the most incredible kind of feeling for me to know that she was there. And I've already told my daughters, just to warn them, I'm going to be there. If I wasn't a psychotherapist, I would have been a midwife. I am so excited.
Oh, me too.
So
It's got to be like the pinnacle of amazing, isn't it? To be able to watch a child come into the world.
What will they call you? Have you decided what you're going to be called?
Probably Nana, because that's
Me
what
too! Yay! We can be nanas together!
I think
Nana
Nana
Claire.
just is cool.
Yes!
It's a bit cool.
I'm with you. What would you be called?
Maybe that's northern.
Okay.
Nanny.
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 Oh,
Yeah,
there you
but
go.
your
Some
nanny.
kids are nanny.
I had a nanny,
Yes.
and it was just, nanny to me feels cuddly and affectionate, and I'm looking forward to being a nanny. I can't wait to be a grandparent.
I know.
I think once you know that you're not going to have any more babies, like that's what you have to fix your sights on.
Yeah, I think that's probably
A little bit, you kind of
where
go,
excitement comes from.
You know, that beautiful baby stage and that cuddling stage. And there is also a very special bond between grandparents and grandchildren. There can be, if that relationship is done well. Like, I think that bond is really precious. I think there's a saying, isn't it, where they say grandparents are like the fairy dust that gets sprinkled on the lives of children. And it's like, I've enjoyed watching you and Dad become grandparents, and you know, I remember a Christmas morning when you made them all line up outside, and then they like threw open the door, and there was music playing, and there was balloons, and there was presents, and just all these tiny little sort of 4 and 2-year-olds
Amazing.
ran through the living room floor, and it was just chaos everywhere. It was such like a lovely moment for the family to move into that, and just you know, it feels like a celebration, doesn't it, in that sense?
And thinking about what you were saying, Julie, about how it's that sense of responsibility that you don't have. So the unconditional love is still there, isn't it? There's no difference in kind of how conditional or unconditional that love is. It still feels unconditional, but yet it's somehow less complicated or less kind of complex in terms of the relationship, because less pressure, less responsibility. But I think it just gives a bit. There's more space to have a relationship with your grandchild.
You haven't got to worry about what other people are thinking about your parenting skills.
Going back,
we covered that in one of our episodes.
Right, okay. Well, you haven't got to worry about that. You know, you just enjoy. Yeah, and you're still parenting as a grandparent. You know, you're still exercising discipline and you know, teaching things like that. But for me, I always think, how do the girls want their children to be disciplined? How do they want to raise their children? Because I don't want to step on their toes and do things differently. You know, sort of. So both John and I were very mindful of, you know, sort of what our girls like for the way that they discipline their children.
That's a real challenge, isn't it? I guess when you've got 4 different daughters, all parenting maybe in different ways.
And in fact, they've all gone on this, you know, sort of low sugar, no sugar. You know, grandparents, you know,
It's your job to
part
feed
of the
them
job
sweets.
description to have sweets and chocolate in the house. And then he's sort of like, oh, no sugar this and low sugar.
Absolutely.
So now I've sort of like cut right down, and I think it was Carla said to one of them, oh, Nanny doesn't like you to have sweets. And I said, I do. I said, I'm backing up you. It's you who doesn't like the sweets.
That is so funny. I had a real kind of issue with my parents because my mum was a dental hygienist. There was never sweets or chocolate in our house growing up. My children go there for a week and they get sweets, cakes, get taken out for meals. Their cupboards are full of chocolates and treats. I'm like, what? How does that happen?
In our defence, though, when they get handed back at the end, they're high on sugar. And you can't get them to sleep, and you're just like,
One day of their life.
Well, actually, it's interesting you say that, because when we had to make a slight change in dynamic when we decided to home educate, because you get really involved in that, don't you? And so, like, my mum and dad will have the kids a day a week and do, because your background is educating, isn't it? And it's teaching, and in the church, in schools, you've run community groups and youth groups. You've just always done that sort of thing. And so the kids come to you for a day of amazing discovery, isn't it? It's like they do poetry, they eat food, they make things, they cook things, it's just everything, life skills and education. There's 4 of them crashed into the house, and they do amazing stuff. But we did have to kind of make a decision then, didn't we? If you're spending that much time on them, it's not as simple as, for instance, if they're just seeing you once a week for an afternoon, then different. I can step in and say, these are the boundaries and this is what we're going to do. But actually, when you ask more of your parents, you also need to give more of that.
That's true.
You know, you and dad will have your moments where you have to be able to build your own relationship with them, discipline them and treat them, get them to behave how you want them to behave in your house, which may be different to how I have them behave in my house. And I think that's one of the things, because I sometimes notice grandparents can, like, you feel sorry for them sometimes because they can also get super tired. But you have to, like, for it to be a good, healthy relationship, you have to have power, and they have to have power, and that has to work. You can't have a relationship where you become like the other term of nanny.
Can I ask you a question? Because I'm interested with your peer groups. Have you noticed this year, I think it's this year, in the last few years, the UK has tipped over into more people over 60 than under the age of 16. So there's a growing population in that age group. Have you noticed in your peers that they're much more active with their grandchildren, or there's much more and more grandparents around than maybe your grandparents were?
It's funny, because I actually read a statistic recently that there are 2 million grandparents in Britain who have either taken less hours or given up work altogether to look after the grandchildren. And when you're out and about during the day, I think actually that grandparents or silver tops are the ones that keep this country running.
Yeah, absolutely.
Completely.
Because all the shops and restaurants and tea houses, they survive on us.
True.
And I think that when you do go out, you see quite frequently. In fact, I saw an elderly lady. We were walking along the canal, and I saw an elderly lady. Now, she looked very vulnerable. She looked very frail. And she had this little toddler with her. And I thought, oh, how are you managing? She looked over 80.
Wow.
And there she was with this little toddler. And I thought, wow, you are looking after your grandchildren, or is it your great-grandchild?
Yes.
Yeah, quite possible.
And you see that a lot with the, sort of the elderly or older people, older generation, with their grandchildren, certainly, yeah.
So what would you recommend to, I suppose, those coming through now with new parents, or what's a good way to navigate that? So you and Marina have got a good relationship, and obviously, how have you instigated that caring for the children or caring for the grandchildren?
Well, for me, I think it's just naturally a natural extension of being a parent. It's you don't think about it, you know, and whether or not how you should go about it. It just is that natural extension of parenthood, as far as I can see. You know, there isn't really anything to negotiate in that sense. Can you look after the children? Yes, we can. So we'll do it. You know.
But it is based on the relationship that you have with your girls,
Exactly.
isn't it?
Yeah.
You kind of, in that sense then, because a lot of people won't have an easy connection. So it's almost then, would you say, going back to your relationship first before you try and introduce a third party into that relationship? It's kind of establishing a positive connection there.
Yeah, quite possibly. And I think sometimes it's maybe about, we talk a lot, don't we, about having to go back and kind of face your own narrative and your own kind of story, and having your own children often brings up those memories about growing up yourself. And I think somehow it's important to kind of try and make peace with some of that as much as you can, because your story isn't your relationship with your parents isn't necessarily going to be the same as your children's relationship with your parents, and you've got to allow the space for that to develop you know, in its unique way and its own precious way. Because actually we talk a lot on this show about how life is a kind of a development right the way through. It doesn't stop when we become a parent. It doesn't stop when we become a grandparent. We continue to grow and change. And I think we need to allow, you know, if we've got kind of big issues with our parents about, you know, our own upbringing, we need to kind of allow a sense that they've got the capacity to change and do things differently themselves. And we need to kind of just be a bit more graceful.
I think as well, though, with this generation, is that a lot of them don't have their parents close at hand anymore because they've had to go away for work, or they moved away to university and stayed where they went to university. And so I think what's important then is that if you're in a good church with elderly people there, that, you know, you've got that generation there that can role model grandparenting, and
surrogate grandparents.
And many do.
Yes, they do.
I remember when our girls were small and we sort of went to church. We haven't been Christians very long. We went to a church and there was a number of elderly there. And the girls used to run in there, go and say hello, climb on their laps and dig into their bags for sweets. You know, because my parents lived up in Birmingham and, you know, so we didn't see grandparents that often, or they didn't. So it was nice for them. And the elderly in the church would say, oh, I love it when your daughters come and sort of speak to us. And it made them feel special. And I think sort of like in a church setting where there are elderly, they can begin to feel that they're not of any value anymore. But actually, they've got an immense value for the children of the church.
Mutually beneficial.
I'd like us to have a little look at a VT. We've got a video of your grandchildren, not my two. We've got them of my niece and nephew. So let's have a little look at this.
Lovejoy Kids, action! My nanny and gramps are nice because they always make sure I'm happy and they cheer me up whenever I'm sad.
My grandparents are nice because they homeschool us and teach us, and also whenever we go to their house, they're so kind that they sometimes give us some sweets.
They always laugh in a weird laugh. In a way like this.
And I think they like giving out sweets because it's because my mummy is their mummy, and so they would like to treat us well, and they would like us and teach us about more things, so they'd make them like us more. And it's also funny when they sneeze because they go like,
In what way? How do they treat you differently to how your mum and dad treat you?
My nanny's great because she lets us watch TV and my mum doesn't very often let us watch TV, so it's nice and she's really generous.
They're really fun. Nannies are good at being fun and making the best chicken stew.
Do you think that grandparents are important people to have around, and why?
I think my nanny and grumps are important to come around because they're part of our family and we love our family. That's why I like seeing them all the time.
Because they are very nice, and we wouldn't have nice grandparents if they wasn't around. So they need and so they're very good in people.
What sort of grandparent are you going to be?
When I'm a grandparent, I'm going to be happy and joyful and let my grandchildren play, and I'm going to be funny and make them laugh all the time so they can be happy.
I'm going to make sure that everybody is happy in the family and make sure that they're all well, and if someone is not well, they'll help them.
I love it. I love that, VT.
I like the impression of the sneezing.
Yeah. And you make some mean chicken stew. I'm coming to your house.
That's true. And the sweets got found out.
Absolutely.
And the
TV.
television.
And the television. Do you know, that's not strictly true. They only watch one programme, or maybe two. But you know, what's one of the things that is important, I think, as a Christian grandparent?
Yeah.
As soon as we knew that our daughters were expecting, that's when we started praying.
Yeah.
And so we prayed for our grandchildren before ever they were born, before ever they had a gender, and before actually they grow up and have children of their own. We've already prayed for their husbands and wives.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's important as a grandparent, that you are one of the prayer supports for the family, because sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you know, sort of you can't see the wood for the trees and you don't know how to pray and things are going crazy. But as a grandparent, you can stand back and think, you know, they really need prayer right now about that. And so
absolutely, I think that's really significant in terms of not. I guess it's what I would see as grandparents offering an extra layer of protection in a family, a really significant layer of protection, because you know there are times when parents we've talked about mental health on this show, haven't we? We've talked about all the different stresses and how kind of the pressures that we feel as mums to do it all and to be everything. I think having grandparents that are kind of, you know, that are present or that are even just knowing that they're praying for us, they can offer that spiritual protection, the emotional support, the physical support, the childcare if we need it. There's so many different kind of really significant roles that grandparents play with our families.
I love that you brought church into that and the church family, because that's where we sit as a family. Our parents, mine and my husband's, are not local, so we haven't done parenting with them local for many, many years. And I run a service now at the church that I'm a pastor at, and we call it Thrive. It's for the older adults, and we bump into some of this all the time, where there is a generation that haven't got their grandkids local, but are also beginning to feel devalued. And actually within the local church, I would love to see the local church working in harmony, from all generations connected, where each one works with what they're gifted and our strengths at. But that takes actually, I think, a lot of responsibility on each generation to bring to the table and into the house what they can bring into the house. They're not just caregivers. They're not just the people that can bring sweets. They actually be able to confidently walk and go, I have wisdom for life. I have been walked with Jesus for a long time. Within my group, there's 2,000 years worth of Christianity in it. We counted it up. They've been saved. We added it up, 2,000 years worth. As long as Christ, like it was before, you know, almost as long as when Jesus, 2,000 years worth of like walking with Jesus. I'm like, that has to impact just church life. And so feeling like, you know, that up until before 1945, I think it's you were born, before then is the silent generation, then there's the baby boomers and all that brings with that. You'll be a baby boomer, no doubt. Are you let's not go down that path. But this in Psalms it says this: even in old age they will produce fruit, and they will remain vital and green, and they will declare the Lord is just. And I think it is our responsibility as parents now with children growing up to be able to instill in our children that I respect that is not just a respect to respect your elders, but an understanding that they're a place to go through for wisdom, for advice, for guidance, for courage to see what God does. So I celebrate what you're doing. I love that you're giving that time to help your grandkids.
Well, I think, I'm looking forward, I'm sure Johnny's as well. We're looking forward to, as well, seeing the children throughout all their, sort of years and seeing them into their teenagers. I remember I was at a Christian conference and the eldest one, Luke, was just a couple of weeks old. And we were at the convention and I was giving him a cuddle because he was crying or whatever, and I was just taking him out and giving him a cuddle. And then standing by the side of me was this tall teenager. He looked about 16. He had his shorts on, and I looked at Luke and I looked at him and I thought, one day.
And it won't be long either.
No, not at all.
I really appreciate that at the moment because, having a 14-year-old myself, like when my girls were little, my parents didn't live in the same country as us. So it's only really in the last 4 years that they've been around. But to see Libby's relationship with both her grandparents develop over the last 4 years has been one of the most precious things to me ever, because she has, even now in her kind of moodiness and, just when she's at her teenage worst.
Yeah, totally.
You bring my dad into the equation and her whole face lights up and she'll just want to be with him. They will sit for hours just chatting about politics, and actually I love the fact that, when I was growing up, there were things that I probably didn't feel able to talk to my mum and dad about. But actually, my daughter can talk to them about anything. And I just think it's amazing. And it really shows me how actually that narrative can change and things can shift and evolve and develop. And, I suppose relationships can change even, going right the way on.
That is actually a thread of the Mum Show throughout all of this, I think, actually, is that there's always a way back, there's always a way through, because Jesus is the way. And all the time you're centering your family on Jesus, and even with your relationships with your grandparents, they're going to be tricky at times. And also because it's tricky with your parents at times, it's tricky with your spouse's parents at times. You're talking about another generation, sometimes you're talking about another culture, you're talking about another way of doing things. And I think there's a blessing in saying, okay, the one thing we do know is that Jesus is at the centre. Even if no one else believes it, we can believe Christ for a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we can say, I just refuse to believe that in Jesus there is no restoration, because I know there is. So whatever that's going to look like, and whether it's today or it's not today, I'm going to choose that path, that even if this relationship gets tricky or difficult, I'm going to believe that there is restoration possible because Christ paid that price on the cross.
We have to believe that. There's always hope.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're running out of time, but I would like to know if there's anything you would like to leave the grandparent or parent audience with before you leave.
Yes, well, I'm going to share a verse from Isaiah, actually, and this is going from when I was a parent and a young parent and a new Christian parent, and I came across this Bible verse and it really meant a lot to me. And as an older person, I often share this verse with younger mums, and that's from Isaiah 14. It says, "He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those with young." And I think it's keeping in mind that God is in control. He's gently leading. He's not pushing. He's not judging your parenting skills, but he's gently leading. I think that's lovely.
Very lovely.
But also Billy Graham. Let's have a quote from Billy Graham.
Let's do it.
He said, "The greatest legacy one can pass on to one's grandchildren is not money or other material things accumulated in one's life, but rather a legacy of character and faith."
I love that.
So good.
I love that bit about faith. It lines up, doesn't it, within Timothy when Paul says, I see the gift of faith that I believe was passed down to you first from your grandmother Lois and then your mother Eunice. And it is that gift of faith. It's so much more valuable than a bag of sweets. Or than, not that I'm saying there's a problem, okay? I'm gonna move on that. You can give them a few more sweets. I've learnt my lesson. But it's part of that's.
It's true,
isn't it?
And it's in the Bible all the way through where grandparents have a huge role to play. Even in the book of Proverbs, there's this story at the end of Proverbs, and we all think it's this woman, this Proverbs 31 woman. Well, she doesn't exist. It was a story that grandmas, I know, well, if you know it, she's not a real woman. It's a story that grandmas actually wrote and embellished, and actually it's a culmination of the whole of the book of Proverbs into one section. It's about lady wisdom. It's about the wisdom of life, and it was grandmas sat around campfires maybe or at bedtime and told their sons and grandsons, this is the kind of woman you should look for. But in actual fact, this is the kind of wisdom that you should look for. And I just think that's a vital role that grandparents play is that the passing on of knowledge and wisdom, not just caregiving. It's good, isn't it?
Yeah, it is amazing. And actually, I think we talk about being really intentional as mums, and I think part of our intentional living needs to be perhaps asking God to open up pathways if they're closed. How can we bring this wisdom back? Let's not accept that anymore. If there's difficulties, Lord, how can you help us to bring restoration so we don't lose that wisdom? This has basically been a celebration of grandparents, which why not? Because we all need them. Well, I hope you've enjoyed joining us today. If you want to catch up with some more Mum Show chat, then you can head over to our website at Promise Collective, or if not, we'll catch you very soon. Bye.
Hello parents, don't forget to say hello. We're at promisecollective.co.uk. Bye!